folks, Rob Dreemeyer here. Welcome to Broadway Barfly.
If you're a theater fan who loves a great cocktail, click that subscribe button because Broadway Barfly is the channel for you.
Edith Bouvier was born the daughter of a wealthy Wall Street lawyer in 1895. Throughout her life, she aspired to a career as a singer, which made her the black sheep of her socially prominent family. She was the sister of John Bouvier, which made her the aunt of the future First Lady, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy. In 1917, she was married to Edith Beale, who was a lawyer at her father's firm. The couple had 3 children. They had a daughter named Edith, who was affectionately known as Little Edie, and they also had 2 sons. In 1923, the family bought a big, beautiful house on the beach in East Hampton, Long Island, New York. The house was called Grey Gardens, and it was named that because of the color of the dunes and the sea mist. The Beales separated in 1931 and they officially divorced in 1946. As part of the settlement, Edith got to keep Grey Gardens, but she wasn't given any sort of alimony. Around the same time, her father also drastically reduced her share of inheritance from his estate, ostensibly because of her eccentricities. Well, this reduced income made it financially difficult for her to maintain the upkeep on such a large beachfront property. In the years following the divorce, Little Edie lived in Manhattan, where she pursued an acting and modeling career. After several years of cajoling by her mother, Little Edie moved back to Grey Gardens in 1952. They started to sell off their possessions to make ends meet, but over the years, the grounds became overgrown, the house fell into disrepair, and it was eventually overrun by feral cats. Yet the 2 women continued to live in the squalor. By 1972, Grey Gardens had become an embarrassing eyesore for the affluent town of East Hampton, and the county health commissioner stepped in and issued a notice of eviction saying the tenants had to vacate until the grounds were cleaned and basic utilities were restored to the house. In any other situation, this would have been fodder for local gossip, but because the Beales had a famous relative, it made national headline news. By this time, Jacqueline Kennedy was married to Aristotle Onassis, and she stepped in to help. She and her sister Lee Radziwill contributed the money to have the grounds cleaned and basic living conditions restored to the house so their aunt and their cousin wouldn't be evicted. Also during this time, Lee Radziwill was having a conversation with 2 documentary filmmakers, Albert and David Maysles. They were brothers, and they were talking about making a documentary of the Bouvier family, and in particular about Jackie and Lee's childhood growing up in East Hampton. After some preliminary interviews with the family, the idea was dropped, but those interviews did introduce them to Big Edie and Little Edie, and they were fascinated by these 2 women who inhabited Grey Gardens, and they decided that was the subject of their documentary. Well, because both Big Edie and Little Edie had aspired to show business careers, they readily agreed to having their lives filmed. In 1975, the Maysles brothers released their documentary, Grey Gardens, and it became an instant cult classic, and it remains so to this day. 30 years after the release of the film, the songwriting team of Scott Frankel and Michael Corey and the writer Doug Wright created a musical based on the film. Their show opened off-Broadway at Playwrights Horizons in 2006. The first act of their musical Grey Gardens is largely fiction, but it takes place in the glory days of Grey Gardens. Big Edie is preparing a party to celebrate Little Edie's engagement to Joe Kennedy Jr. Joe Kennedy Jr. was John and Robert Kennedy's brother who was killed in action during World War II. In real life, Little Edie made claims that she and Joe Kennedy Jr. had been engaged, but in reality they only just met. The second act of the musical jumps forward to the early 1970s and follows real-life events more closely. Much of the action is drawn from or inspired by the documentary film. Christine Ebersole played Big Edie in the first act, and she played the more mature Little Edie in the second act, and in the second act, Mary Louise Wilson took over the role of her mother, Big Edie. The show opened to mixed but encouraging reviews, so the writers continued to work on the show, and it opened on Broadway in 2007 to much more enthusiastic praise, especially for the performances that Mary Louise Wilson and Christine Ebersole gave. Both women earned Tony Awards for their performances that year. In case you're wondering what happened to Grey Gardens and the 2 Edies, they continued living in the house after the cleanup, and Big Edie died at the age of 81 in 1977. Little Edie continued living there, and she pursued a somewhat ill-advised cabaret career. Finally, in 1979, she sold Grey Gardens to the journalist Ben Bradley and his wife Sally Quinn for $220,000, with the stipulation that they could not tear it down. She told them all it needed was a coat of paint. Well, they gave it much more than a coat of paint, and they fully restored the house to its former glory. Little Edie retired to Bal Harbour, Florida, where she lived until her death in 2002 at the age of 84. In 2017, Sally Quinn sold the house to the fashion designer Liz Lang for $15.5 million. It's sort of interesting that the house has ended up in the hands of a fashion designer because Little Edie was somewhat of a fashion icon herself. So to toast the most famous house on Long Island, rivaled perhaps only by the Amityville Horror House, we're going to be making a Long Island iced tea. The Long Island iced tea sounds and looks as if it's some sort of elegant cocktail to be sipped out on the beach, but in reality it's sort of a hodgepodge mess of a drink. It calls for 5 different types of alcohol, which if anything is a surefire recipe for a hangover. If anybody ever tells you a story by starting out and saying, "Oh, the last time I had Long Island iced teas," you can rest assured that story is going to have a tragic and embarrassing ending. So the story goes, a man named Bob Butts, who went by the nickname of Rosebud, yeah, who knew, created the drink at the Ocean Beach Inn where he was a bartender in 1972. He says he created the cocktail as part of a competition they were having to see who could create the best cocktail made with triple sec. So for his entry, he filled a Collins glass with ice, added a little bit of all of the lighter colored spirits they had behind the bar, put in his triple sec, threw in some sour mix, topped it off with Coke, and voila, the Long Island iced tea was born. I can't find anywhere where he actually says he won that competition, but certainly he was the winner in the long run because the Long Island iced tea just exploded in popularity, and today it certainly has earned its place on the list of famous cocktails, or maybe we should say infamous cocktails. Everybody puts their own spin on the Long Island iced tea, but I came across an interesting video online that had Bob Butts himself demonstrating how he made his drink. Apparently he's alive and well and living somewhere on Long Island. So I figured his were the instructions that we would use. I'm only making one minor alteration. To make the Long Island iced tea, we need vodka, rum, gin, tequila, triple sec, cola, and in his video he used sour mix, but I'm going to be using lemon juice and simple syrup, which in the end will give us the same effect. So we start with our Collins glass filled with ice, and it's important that there's a lot of ice because we need all of that to dilute the drink because this is a lot of booze. So we start by adding a ½ an ounce of each of our spirits. We have the vodka, the rum, the gin, the tequila, then a ½ an ounce of the triple sec, and then about 3/4 of an ounce of the lemon juice, and 3/4 of an ounce of the simple syrup. And notice he did not shake or stir or anything, he just topped it off with some Coke. And we're going to garnish ours with a wedge of lemon, and to keep it classy, we'll also give it a little sprig of mint for Grey Gardens. And there you have a Long Island iced tea. Cheers.
If you enjoyed the video, why not give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends? Feel free to leave your comments and click that subscribe button because there's a lot more Broadway Barfly to come.